Good evening, and it's Lilia from Heal Scotland and Scotland's Wild Medicine. And tonight I'm delighted to have with me Hugh from Angarach Forest Therapy, Forest Bathing. Hugh, thank you so much for coming to the festival. I really, really appreciate having this phenomenal. I'm obsessed by forests and forest bathing, so I'm delighted to have you come down to share that with our guests at the festival. How are you?
Hi, I'm not so bad, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah, good. I'm getting very excited about the festival. It's so nice talking to everybody, and it really gets you kind of buzzing. I think we've got so many different, workshops, speakers, talks. We've got the whole family area, so we can really appeal to a much wider audience this year. I'm hoping we've sold loads of tickets, so it's going great. So listen, tell us a little bit about how you got into forest bathing, and then you can tell us a little bit about it for people that don't really know yet.
So just before the COVID pandemic, I was working for a local mental health charity, and as part of that, I used to go on or used to help one of our local High Life Highland countryside rangers to run a sort of nature walk for well-being. And really, she'd talk about the flora and fauna and archaeology, and I just used to lead a few mindfulness exercises and kind of keep the stragglers from getting too far behind. And I got some green health funding to do more green health activities. And I live on a croft, and we were looking at starting the croft as a social croft, a bit like a care farm. So we got some green health money, and then COVID started, and everything I'd planned was face to face. And the funders were saying, well, innovate if you can. So I thought, well, what could I do? And during the sort of initial parts of COVID, I discovered this idea of forest bathing, or Shinrin-yoku, as it was originally called in Japan. And I thought, well, that would be something that I could communicate to other people through webinars and things. So rather than doing face-to-face work, I ran some webinars and looked at ways to encourage people to spend their 1 hour outside a day sort of connecting with nature. So forest bathing, it's nothing to do with wild swimming. It's not about going, wild swimming in a mountain lochen. It's a nature immersive experience. And as I said, it started in Japan, really, in the early 1980s. Japan has quite a culture of nature connection already. So both Shinto and Buddhism have strong nature connection elements to them. In the early 80s, Japan was experiencing a massive tech boom, and the culture in Japan is very much around working hard. And in fact, there's a culture really of overwork. And what they were finding were that a significant number of people were becoming very ill through overwork. And in fact, the Japanese developed a term called karyoshi, which translates as overwork death. And it was to describe the people who almost quite often in the prime of their lives dropped dead at work, either from heart attacks or strokes and things. And the head of the Japanese Forestry Agency felt that the abundance of forests in Japan is about the third most forested country in the Western world. Only really Finland, I think, and either Sweden or Norway are more forested. But Japan is forested with native trees rather than monoculture. So it's a very conducive atmosphere, really, to going out in nature. And the head of the Forestry Agency conceptualized this idea of encouraging people to use the natural resources that there were to encourage people to engage with nature mindfully, in the hope that this would reduce stress, reduce anxiety, and reduce depression. And really interestingly, he felt that if he could encourage people to go out and appreciate the benefits of being in nature, that they would then become better environmental stewards and would be more proactive environmentally. So it was kind of 40 years ahead of really where we are now. So that was really where it came from.
And they've got so much science to show that, you know, the reduction in adrenaline and, you know, the phytoncides coming off the trees. It's you know, it's fascinating that how we've ever thought that we were separate from nature. That's what I think. How did we ever get to that place that we didn't realise when understanding about the Wood Wide Web, the mycelium, and all the interconnection, the intelligence in the plants, but for some reason we seem to think we're walking about completely disconnected from that. It's crazy, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. You know, there's increasing concern about this. You know, Richard Louv wrote a book about The Last Child in the Woods, which is about his concerns about children becoming increasingly disconnected and nature deprived, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know one of my friends who does the, you know, the kind of outside nurseries, and the data is absolutely mind blowing from risk aversion, eyesight, you know, the microbiome, so your actual health. I mean, that's just three of the list of about 100 things, benefits from being outside a lot more. And, you know, I think one thing, my uncle, you would never be allowed to do this now, but he used to take us into the forest. He would cut down trees and we would go with him and play in the forest. So I've got that, even that smell, and we used to creosote the trunks of the trees. And, you know, so I've always, the smells are so pungent and it's aromatherapy, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And you were talking before about phytoncides, which are these volatile chemicals that trees emit, and they emit them, you know, partly as sort of antifungal or anti-insect agents, but there's a lot of evidence that when humans inhale them, that it boosts our immune system.
Yeah.
Both the Japanese and the South Koreans are so interested in this concept that lots of their universities have departments of forest medicine that you know examine these things and measure the killer cells, which are the white blood cells that form our immune system, and they measure them and get people to inhale different kinds of phytoncides.
Yeah, I know. It's I think it seems to me that I'm learning something every single day now about the power of nature. I mean, I was born and brought up in the country. We're always in the forest and the sea, climbing hills, making huts, and, you know, out. That was just the way we were brought up. And I'm one of six, so we were put out the house. You didn't get any option. You were put out, and then of course they had a job getting you back in. So when I moved to the city, I really noticed, you know, not being able to jump in the sea, go for a walk in the woods. I know instantly how much better you feel just the fresh air. But I think the thing is now people almost need the science, um, because we can't really trust that the fact that it feels good means that it is good. You know, if that lifts your spirits.
Absolutely. I hate to say, I think I've increasingly become reassured by science, or it kind of underscores what I'm trying to do when it, you know, I say, you know, it's innate that we know that nature's good for us, but we've got these scientists in their white coats who are doing experiments and telling us that it's definitely good for us.
Well, exactly, and I think it's interesting. You know, it's interesting to really understand how the body interacts with nature and the elements. You know, when I lived in Malta, I used to sun gaze a lot, And I can survive on half the amount of food that I really feel I need to eat here because it's so powerful. I stopped wearing glasses when I moved to the sun. When I was living in the sun. It's the power of natural light. It's nice
Mm.
being warm as well, mind you, I have to say. So, can you talk us through? So, you're going to be taking a group out at the festival. So, can you explain to people what that would look like for those that are interested in joining you, or for those that are maybe wondering, well, what do you do? Because I
Yeah,
know it's not about getting from A to B, and it's not about biking through the. Can you explain it?
yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you a bit about what it is and a bit really about what it isn't. So, guided forest bathing walks usually last between about 2 and 3 hours. But during this time, we rarely go more than a mile. And I've got some favourite places that I guide. One place near us, there's a loop through the woods of 800 metres, and I can make 800 metres of woodland path last 3 hours really quite easily.
Cool.
So yeah, as you said, it's not really about geographic goals. It's about reaching a mental state of relaxation, really. So whilst we might aim to get around the loop in the time that we're out, it's not like a power walk where we're aiming to cover a distance, or Munro bagging where you're trying to get to the top of something and back.
Yeah, it's not about exercise per se as we know it.
No, it's about it's a combination of sort of fairly slow walking and quite a lot of sitting down and a bit of exploring. And during this time, I give what are often called forest bathing invitations. They're activities to encourage you to connect with nature through one or more of your senses. So it might be about walking slowly and noticing the things around you that are moving, or it might be around feeling different textures, or sitting by water and noticing how being close to water makes you feel, the effect that the sounds have upon you. Yeah, so it's really about mindfully connecting with nature. So it's about noticing what's going on around you through all your different senses.
Mm-hmm.
With it being inspired by Japanese culture, we quite often end with a tea ceremony, which ideally is made with naturally foraged items. However, I've got to say that's about as far as my sort of tree identification and foraging skills go. One of the things that maybe appealed to me about forest bathing was when I first started my training, I was told that forest bathing wasn't really about tree identification. It was less about learning the names of trees and plants and more about learning how they can make you feel. And I'm rubbish at tree identification, so I tend to restrict myself to the things I forage to make tea from that I know aren't going to cause people problems.
Yes, because I co-wrote the book Scotland's Wild Medicine with a medical herbalist, people sort of assume that I have knowledge of all the plants. And I'm learning a lot more, but yeah, sometimes I'm like, I feel as if I've got a plant dyslexia. I'm like, well, yeah, you're green. You should know what you are, but there's so many different ones. There's some that are obvious, but other times I'm just like you stick to the ones that I know. Wild garlic.
I'm fairly good at identifying Scots pine
Yeah.
and nettles, both of which make a really, really nice tea.
Yeah, and the pine tree there's so many medicinal properties to it too. And I was actually just listening to a podcast and they were talking about, a big problem for humans right now is fungus, candida, in the digestive system, and which the pine, the essential oil of the pine tree is really good for that. And yeah, it's all there for us once you understand. So, what would you say forest bathing's done for your life? How's it enhanced?
Well, probably if you go back 20 years, I've experienced periods of particularly anxiety and depression in my life. And sort of probably 20 years ago was at the time when GPs were waking up to the benefits of mindfulness. And I remember speaking to my GP, and he said, "Oh, give mindfulness a try," and gave me the details of, I think it was the Oxford Mindfulness Centre, which promoted what we would probably call breathing mindfulness. Now, one of the other things that I have is permanent tinnitus. And I found that when I tried breathing mindfulness, I became more aware of my tinnitus. And tinnitus tends to get worse when you get stressed. So what I was finding was that actually the activity was, in a way, making me more stressed rather than less stressed. It just was, it didn't work for me, which I found quite frustrating, because I knew several people who experienced the same affective mental health problems that I'd been facing, who said, "Oh, mindfulness is brilliant." So it kind of wasn't there. And then at the beginning of COVID, as I say, I discovered this concept of nature mindfulness. And suddenly I was practicing mindfulness with what I would call an external focus. So rather than focusing purely on breathing and what was going on inside of me, I would be focusing outside. So it would be, what can I see that appeals to and gives me pleasure? What can I hear that gives me pleasure? And I found, and suddenly it just clicked. I sometimes describe it as being like coming home. I suddenly went, this is what I've been looking for. This is the thing that I've needed. And so whilst I have tinnitus all the time, I can sit quite happily and listen to the birds. And rather than being affected by my tinnitus, I think this is great because I can hear the birds despite my tinnitus. Yes. I think it's also one of the reasons that I particularly like sitting by running water, that it tends to mask the ringing in my ears rather than exacerbate it. The other thing I've been really interested in over the last couple of years is the effect that sort of random noise can have, partly on people with ADHD and partly on ability to ruminate. It started when I read a journal article that said that what are often called brown and pink noise, so they're sort of more mid-tone and bassy than white noise, which kind of covers the whole sound spectrum. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people with ADHD found that they could concentrate better if they had this kind of random noise in the background, and recommended that you could get different kinds of random noise on YouTube or Spotify. And I looked some of them up, and I don't have ADHD, but I am a terrible ruminator. And what I found is that listening to sort of running water, it actually becomes very difficult to ruminate. Rather than it being a difficult thing to stop, it becomes quite a difficult thing to do. So I love sitting by, running streams, or I've become a real big waterfall chaser. Everywhere I go where there's a waterfall, I keep stopping.
Wonderful.
So I rarely now drive past the Falls of Falach without spending 10, 15 minutes there. So that's really kind of how I've discovered it.
That's interesting about the noise. I've heard people talking about the white noise, but I didn't really fully understand what it was doing. So, well, listen, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that with us. And I'm looking forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah.
Are you coming for the whole weekend?
Yes, I will be.
Awesome. So people, you'll be around for people to chat to you as well. You know, that's another reason we're doing the live, so that people get to know you a little bit before they actually arrive. So thank you so much. And I look forward. I'm just like, oh my God, I want to go to that. I want to go to that already. I'm like, how am I going to work it all in? So you'll be leaving from Tarbert Holiday Park, all the kind of the water sports, the forest bathing, and the foraging's all, you know, be going from there. Awesome. Well, thanks a million. It's lovely to meet you, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Bye.
thank you.